Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome along to a virtual Donington Park for the first ever round of the EnduroKA Winter Series. This new series that has been introduced comes with the fantastic support that we've had from the likes of Grid Finder, also Positive Perception, who you will see shortly when the cars head onto the grid, have created all of these fantastic liveries for all of the EnduroKA cars that we see out there. Support also coming from MSVT Racing, EnduroKA itself, and our Winter Series sponsors, Burton Power, all coming together to bring together this virtual series, which will take in the vast majority of the circuits that the series for real will race in. So we're opening up here at Donington Park, then we'll head to Silverstone in a fortnight's time for round number 2, before we head to Snetterton, not on the 200 circuit where we usually race, but it will be the 300 circuit where we race in the EnduroKA Winter Sim Series, before it's Alton Park and Brands Hatch, and the very final round taking place on the 18th of March will be voted for by the participants in this series. So lots to look forward to, and if this evening is half as good as the practice race that we had at Oschersleben in Germany earlier on this week, then we are in for an absolutely belting inaugural EnduroKA Sim Winter Series. Mark Well chatting to you now. Joining me in commentary for this round here at Donington Park is Jack Werrell.
Hello everybody, and what a pleasure it is to be here. Obviously, after seeing and spectating and even covering one or two rounds of the actual EnduroKA series, seeing them in the simulator is brilliant, because this is where, if I'm honest, I feel at home. This is where everybody starts, whether it be commentators, broadcast, race drivers, all start on a simulator nowadays, because it is that strong. It's got that much of a following. And why not utilize that? We've got a great car available to us, a very well-made mod, after helping myself to it and sort of seeing my way around Donington Park on a number of occasions in that car, most of it spent sideways. But it's a great car on a great circuit, and what a place to open up the EnduroKA Winter Sim Series. It's a circuit that's got heavy and light braking zones, a mix of slow and fast corners, plenty of undulation change, and it's wide enough to, I'm sure these guys will find out tonight, to go 3, maybe even 4 wide. I definitely wouldn't write that off the books. And of course, this is where the BTCC open their championship as of late. So why not do the same? It's a great circuit, a great car, and we're in for a great night.
And I think it's wonderful that the first round we're ever having of the Winter Sim Series at Donington Park, and that's the location where we had the first ever real EnduroKA race a few years ago. Now, this mod on these cars, absolutely fantastic. We'll come to the times and the grids and things like that shortly, but the times that the cars have been doing in real life around this circuit, the race that we had, the last race at Donington Park took place on the 3rd of April in 2022. Fastest lap of the race was a 1:33.9. Well, of course, qualifying is always that little bit quicker. Well, Gary Preble, who will start from pole and will come to the grid later, 1:33.3. So even the mod that Assetto Corsa and everybody has produced goes to show that the mod is absolutely real to life. The grid, Gary Preble will start from pole position from GP Racing, a man who regularly we see racing at the likes of Castle Combe, and it's James Black that will join him on the front row of the grid. Ginetta Super Cup racer Eric Bolton lines up on row number 2 with Tom O'Farrell alongside, and it's Bobby Simmons and Jamie Peters-Ennis that line up on row number 3. Colin Dunn has Glenn Copeland for company on row number 4, Glenn having raced in this series in the past, and it's Joe Kingston-Lee and another EnduroKA racer, Nick Creed, that line up there on row number 5. Nathan Down has David Evans for company on row number 6, and it's Scott Thorne and another EnduroKA racer, Callum Perfect, that's there on row number 7. Row 8 sees James Wakefield line up on the inside of the 8th row of the grid, and alongside him he's got Jack Mace, and it's Frank Frostick, who we've seen racing in EnduroKA and is a regular mechanic for the likes of Graves Motorsport in the series as well. He lines up alongside Mark Beaumont. Ollie Ricks and James Saville line up there on row number 10 with Tim Parsons and Rhys Atkins on row 11. Tom Bunton and Jacob Kodani line up there on row number 12 with Alex Walker, Markin Carpenter, Greg Giles, Costa C, and one of our marshals, Chris Humphreys, lining up there in 29th position on the grid, hence why his team name is the Brands Hatch Orange Army. And that sort of sums up this series, Jack. You know, EnduroKA in real life is serious but really good fun series to get you introduced into motorsport. The Sim Winter Series, or the Winter Sim Series, exactly the same. We've got a mixture of drivers, mechanics, hangers-on, friends, family, marshals, you name it. Everybody's coming together for this little bit of, again, serious but fun.
Yeah, and that's the absolute joy of the simulator. Is widely available as long as you've got a system that can run it. Anybody can jump on, and much like the real series, it is a spec series. All the cars are made to be as close as possible and minimise the performance margins that some of them may have. And in the simulator, the same rule applies. Everybody's working with the same piece of machinery. I think the only thing you can maybe play around with is pressures and potentially suspension setup and how much fuel you've got in the car. But all of that doesn't really give you a massive amount of advantage, because we're here for 60 minutes worth of racing. We even have a 90-minute round at Brands Hatch in 4 or 6 weeks time. So there's so many different things that the drivers can do, but hopefully that doesn't affect the racing too much. And of course, one little mistake in this, it can really throw you to the tail end of the order, and you've got to spend the rest of those 60 minutes fighting your way back through.
Yes, as I found out in the practice race on Wednesday evening at Oschersleben, qualified 7th, made a mistake, dropped to 9th or 10th, fought back, a little bit of contact, fell back, but yeah, really, really good fun. And I will be, not just in the virtual commentary box for this series, I will be on the grid for some of it as well, and we're hoping that we might be able to get you behind the wheel of a car as well, at least virtually in this series, Jack. So the countdown to the race is on. I think it's worth pointing out, Jack, that it's a 60-minute race, but there is a mandatory pit stop. So the pit window opens after the first 10 minutes of the race. It remains open between the 10th and the 50th minute of the race, i.e. it closes for the final 10 minutes. And during that period of time, all of the cars have to come in and serve a pit stop. What they want that pit stop to be, Jack, is up to them and their strategy, depending on what fuel they start with. Do they want to change tyres? Are they going to leave them on?
Yeah, so yet more things to think about. It's all about the strategy. Some drivers, admittedly not us, may want to see a safety car to minimise that time loss. But then, obviously, if we have a safety car, there's got to have been a cause for one. So fingers crossed we don't see any safety cars and we stay green throughout the entire race. But of course, like you say, strategy is something to think about. 60 minutes worth of racing. There could be a potential for a little bit of traffic disturbance, whether you be the lead car or the tail car. You've both got to navigate each other as quickly but also as safely as possible. And going off what you see in real life, I would imagine it will be echoed in the simulator. Once you get in a little pack, there could be 4, 5, 6 cars even, all nose to tail. Instead of just fighting tooth and nail to get in front of each other, it's 60 minutes. They might just want to sit in each other's toe, gain on the cars in front, and then develop that battle. So we could see a battle between 2 cars, and with it being EnduroKA, we could see a battle of 12 cars.
It was amazing how close it was in all of the practice sessions that we've had on the run up to this race. Amazing how close it was in qualifying as well. I'm expecting a bit like the EnduroKA series for real, they'll be hunting in packs. So some of them will be busy squabbling and dropping back because that's what they want to do. Others will be working together, as you suggested, sitting in a group, not trying to squabble, trying to get the break on others and then seeing as to whether that's going to work for them and their strategy. And of course, what we do have is a mixture of abilities. We have some drivers, you know, the likes of Gary Preble, for instance, who was one of those that was up towards the top of the timesheets. Huge amounts of racing experience. Gary's been racing for real for the best part of 20 or 25 years. And others maybe have zero racing experience. And I know certainly some of them, their first ever sim racing series that they've entered as well. So we've got a mixture of abilities, but we also still have, despite that mixture of abilities, going to show that the car is an easy one to try and at least get a hang of, but trying to find those extra few tenths. It goes to show that it's a car that most people can adapt to.
Yeah, absolutely. Jumping into the car just in some of my free time, figuring out how the car drives. You can. I don't want to say it's an easy car to drive. It's an incredibly rewarding car to drive when you get it right. But it strips you back to basics almost. You learn how to be smooth and go. Being slightly slower into the corner can massively give you an advantage on the exit of the corner. Slow and fast out very much applies to these cars. You've got to be nice and smooth with all of your inputs. Of course, these cars have ABS. I don't know whether it's definitely mandatory whether you have it on or off. Having it off, you do end up going in a straight line a lot of the time whilst braking for a corner, as I found out the hard way. But with that ABS, it massively brings the sort of trying to outbrake someone. It makes it a very hard task because you're both on the limit of the brakes already because the ABS has had to kick in. So late braking moves, whilst not impossible, they are very difficult. So I think a lot of this could potentially be tyre management, definitely pit strategy, but then also just keeping your nose clean, staying nice and smooth throughout the race, keeping it on the tarmac most importantly, and picking your battles.
and maintaining momentum more than anything. Yeah, I've always said that driving these sorts of cars, because I've done a couple of rounds of this in the past at the likes of Snetterton and at Brands Hatch for the IndyCar 500. These cars are very similar to if you've ever raced a kart in the past as well, which means that it's all about momentum. It's all about when you go into a corner, do you want to brake into the corner, or would you rather throw it in a little bit, let it get a little bit sideways, and let it scrub? And there's a fine balance to have. And these cars, these virtual cars, are exactly the same. Go into a corner too quickly, the car gets a little bit sideways, scrubs too much speed, and all of a sudden you've lost all of your apex speed into the corner, you've lost all of your exit speed, and you're going to lose places.
Yeah, it's so interesting to see, having both raced a kart in a simulator and a KA in the simulator. I see what you mean. Very, very similar. And like I said, had plenty of experience going sideways in these KAs, and they don't have the most monumental power figures in the world. Let's say that. They're not exactly going to spin the world the other way. And you really do realise that, because even if it's just 2 or 3 mile an hour, you go slightly slower into the corner than the car in front. You realise that, especially at Snetterton, like you say, we will go to. If you're just slightly slower going onto the straight, you do a bit more of a lift, or you have to do a mid-corner correction because you've gone a bit too hot into the corner. 1 car length can very quickly become 10. So it's so difficult to find that balance, like you say. And I've got to say, the winning driver will be the smoothest.
I absolutely, yeah. You could look at the average lap times and the consistencies, which all of the data we can dive into after the race as well, post race, and consistency was what won the practice race at Oschersleben on Wednesday, and all of the drivers towards the sharp end, their consistency of lap times was staggering. When you've only got in the real car 70 power strokes out of the 1.3 litre Duratec engine, then it's the same in the virtual car as well. Not a great deal of power. You've got to try and keep that momentum going. The only other subtle change to the real series, Jack, is that the real series rolling starts. Here within Assetto Corsa, standing starts for these cars.
Yeah, so it could be a tricky one, although I don't think wheel spin will be a major issue in these cars. It is a thing, as I've noted, like leaving pit boxes and things like that, but I don't think it'll be that much of an issue. I'm sure that being a couple of positions into turn 1 might help, but then you've got to remember, this is pretty much an endurance race. It's 60 minutes. There's a lot of racing to do. If you decide, you know what, I'm not going to go for those positions at turn 1, you're really not going to lose out too much, because then you've got all of those cars in front of you to work with, draft with, and mistakes happen to the best of us. So I don't think it'll be that much of an issue, the starts. It would be nice to see rolling starts, but then that means you're going, oh God, almost 80 miles an hour, Jesus, into turn 1 in a KA with quite a sizable grid. It's great to see that we've got a nice full grid, but 29 KAs going slightly quicker than you'd expect to turn 1. I can't imagine that would go too well. So a standing start, probably the safest option.
I think so. I think standing start is a very safe option. We do have the facility for a virtual safety car as well. When I say virtual, I mean there will be a safety car out on circuit, but yeah, we're racing within the sim. So there is a safety car potentially we could have out. Now that is only likely to happen if we have a multiple car incident where several drivers all are trying to scramble their way back onto circuit, and it compromises a load of them and will compromise their races. So there is the capacity, should it be deemed appropriate by the officials, to deploy our BMW M2 safety car out onto circuit. Very similar car to you would see at any of the MSV circuits as well. So even that fine attention to detail, Jack, comes down to the liveries on the cars, it comes down to the advertising around the circuit, and even the BMW safety car we're using.
Yeah, and I've got to say that BMW safety car, whilst in real life looks and sounds amazing, in the simulator it drives even better, because we have had that availability. It's an amazing car to drive, but obviously I don't think the safety car driver will be able to drive it at full chat with a grid of PAs behind them. And this is, yeah, like you say, it's all been fine-tuned. The driver of the safety car and all of the drivers, they've been through the full race briefing and read through the regulations. It's great to see that everyone is taking it seriously, but they're all out there to have some fun as well. So it's a serious, professional, but also a very nice paddock to be part of as well.
So the grid is fully formed. You can see the safety car at the back of the grid, And we will very shortly get things underway. Gary Preble starting in the white car from pole position. James Black alongside. The red lights are coming on, and we're about to get the EnduroKA Winter Sim Series underway here at Donington Park. The lights go out, and both front row men match each other for pace. The BMW safety car just hangs on at the tail end, but you can already see Gary Preble there, just making sure he hugs that all-important inside line on the run towards Redgate Corner, side by side, and it looks as though Tom Farrell is trying to go round the outside of him, but Gary Preble will not have any of that. He will lead out of Redgate Corner. A little bit of contact further back, I think, but it's Gary Preble that leads from Tom Farrell in second position, and James Black is there in third.
Yeah, James Black, after not the greatest start, desperately trying to work his way back through, then nose to tail right the way down through the Craner curves into the old hairpin. See who can pitch the car in soonest. It's still Gary Preble leading the way. Then it's Tom O'Farrell. We'll have a look back. A very, very busy old hairpin. All of the drivers darting around, trying to pick up some nice early positions, trying not to run too wide either. But at the moment, the lead is coming back, or swinging back the way of Tom O'Farrell. He's looking to go all the way around the outside at McLean's. If he manages to do that, he could carry some momentum on the run up towards Coppice, doesn't run too wide, potentially bogs down on the exit, which then allows James Black to work his way up the inside up towards Coppice Corner. He just about takes second place, a little bit of contact between the pair of them, but Tom O'Farrell losing out.
And it now looks as though Bobby Simmons is looking to try and push Tom O'Farrell a further place down through the order. So trying to draw himself alongside. He's got the all-important inside line for the Robert chicane, but is he brave enough on the first lap to try and stick his nose up the inside? He's almost there. The door is open. Is he going to go through? Yes, he does. Up into third position there. Leaps over the curbs. Needs to make sure he doesn't run wide on the exit of the corner. There's contact further back, and it looks as though Eric Bolton is off in the background. There was 2 or 3 cars that just got involved together. But Gary Preble it is that leads at the end of lap number 1. James Black in second place, and Bobby Simmons, his third place might be short-lived here, because it looks as though he's about to lose out again to Tom O'Farrell, who sneaks his way back through into third position.
Yeah, still remaining side by side. However, I think the cars caught up in that incident a little bit further back. David Evans and Callum Perfect were at least 2 of them. I'm not sure whether anybody has dived for the pit lane as of yet, potentially with some early onset damage, but Gary Preble just doing what he can to build that buffer, still side by side for third place in towards the old hairpin. Tom O'Farrell almost gets pitched in towards a spin, but somehow keeps the car on the road. Going for a bit of an off-track moment there was Bobby Simmons after, I don't know whether it was turning in or washing wide from either driver, but they do carry on, but that's cost them heaps of time. That's now brought Colin Dunn back into the equation. We've still got lots of battling going on further back. This is Ollie Ricks trying to defend from Jack May, Scott Thorne and Nathan Down, all fighting away side by side, still running slightly wide, but everyone is just doing what they can to. It looks like that they want to work together, but they want these early positions. Everyone's sort of got a different race strategy.
They're all just pushing as hard as they can at the moment. I think, yes, they might think they want to work together, but as soon as they think they're going to lose a place, they're cracking back on with it again once more. And all of this squabbling has now just allowed the lead 2 to pull away a little bit, as Tom O'Farrell and Bobby Simmons are more focused on just squabbling away for that final podium spot at this stage. They do need to keep an eye, though, on Colin Dunn beginning to close in, and also Joe Kingston Lee is not too far away as well. Side by side again for third and fourth position, and this time it looks as though Bobby Simmons has got the inside line. Tom O'Farrell we've already seen trying to brave it out around the outside, but he takes a later turn in. He's going to try and cut back on the exit, but in these cars it's not easy, just doesn't quite have the momentum, or does he? Sneaks his way up the inside as they head onto the top of Hollywood and down through the Craner curves. So the purple car with the yellow bumpers is Bobby Simmons. Tom O'Farrell is the largely black car but with the orange tail end to it, and they are still side by side all the way down through the Craner curves. Tom O'Farrell eventually gets the job done. He's back into third in brackets for the moment.
Yeah, he's now into third, ran slightly wide. That's cost him heaps of momentum heading up the hill and in towards Schwantz curve. For the moment, it seems like he will get edged out wide. Yes, he will. So that's now Bobby Simmons back up into third place. Tom O'Farrell dropped back down to fourth. Colin Dunn ran a little bit wide on the exit of Redgate, but that hasn't cost him too much because they're still battling away, bump drafting on the run up towards Coppice Corner, being very careful on what gear they want to select. There is quite a big ratio between the gears, so you've got to it's deciding between staying in the torque curve or maximising the revs. A quick flash of the lights there from Tom O'Farrell, doing everything he can focusing well and truly forward, but that rear view mirror will be full of Colin Dunn. Is he going to have a look towards the inside on the run up towards the rubber chicane? No, not as of yet. Bounces off the limiter using all of the curb. I'm looking in the mirrors, you can just about see Colin Dunn there. So it's 3 cars all fighting over 3rd place now.
Yeah, brilliant stuff it is, fighting away, but it is the man who runs as one of the lead mechanics for Purple Sector EnduroKA team that is out front at the moment of that little trio, fighting over 3rd, 4th and 5th position. Tom O'Farrell still on his bumper though as they turn their way through Redgate Corner. Did a bit of racing a few years ago, did Tom O'Farrell, former Brands Hatch Marshal as well, is he, who sits there in 4th position. Fights further back, Jamie Peters-Ennis coming under pressure by the look of things from a few cars that sit behind him, Nathan Down and Eric Bolton being at least a couple of those, but you can see the queue of cars then. Tom Brunton in the orange grid finder car, and Tom Bunton rather in the orange grid finder car, followed by Nick Creed as well, who we've also seen racing in EnduroKA this year. So that's a great fight. 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th, 16th position, heading down in towards the old hairpin.
Yeah, so everybody working together very, very sideways there in front of Tom Bunton. I think that was Eric Bolton just turning in while he was on the brakes, got the front very loaded up, the tail end of the car went light. He managed to collect the moment up, but that's cost him loads of momentum. That was all the scrubbing you were talking about. Tom Bunton trying to go back up the inside, all of the circuit being used there by Scott Thorne, so desperately trying to make inroads on Jack Mace. And we'll look back to Tom Bunton. Did he get in front? Yes, he did. A little bit of contact further behind. They're almost 3 wide, heading up in towards Coppice Corner. Who is going to come out on top? Tom Bunton just about manages to hold on to what is 14th place. That's Eric Bolton and Nick Creed battling behind, still side by side. Alex Saville trying to work his way into the mix. We've still got battles going on further up the road. That's Scott Thorne and I believe Frank Frostick trying to decide who wants that place. Ollie Ricks has lost a position in all of that as well. I can't really keep up.
Well, this is just like typical KA racing. If you've not seen an EnduroKA race in the flesh, I do encourage you to go and have a look at one of them. It's a great way to get into motorsport. It's a very affordable way to go racing as well. The great thing is, you know, some of the longer races, it's 3, 4, 5. You know, we had a 24-hour race at Anglesey last year for the first time. 6 drivers can share the car. You can share the costs. Seats are available as well. So if you're a sole driver, you can bring up one of the teams and buy a seat for one of the races. It's just a series. It's not a championship. So you can dip in and out. So I do encourage you to get involved and pick up the phone to MSVT or Motorsport Vision Track Days and make some inquiries with regards to the real series. This winter sim sports series, already maximum registrations have been received, so we are a couple of drivers down this evening who have not been able to make it, but for every other race we should have pretty much full grids. Brilliant race going on with James Black still trying to hang on as best he can. He has got Ben Simmons Bobby Simmons, I should say, right behind him at this stage, pressurising him all of the way. Is he going to be able to sneak his way through by the look of things? And in fact, that is for the lead, isn't that? That's Gary Preble, I should say, rather, under pressure from James Black. And as the two of them break and head in towards the Robert chicane, Gary Preble still leads the way, but then runs a little bit wide coming out, and that is going to cause a loss of momentum, and that might be sufficient maybe for James Black to pick up the lead, but he's not quite going to do it, I don't think, on the run down towards Redgate.
You could just hear there one of the drivers, couldn't quite pick out who it was, honking the horn, showing their intentions, not only visually but via audio means as well. So honking the horn, desperately trying to distract the car in front, but at the moment it's still Gary Preble leading the way, then James Black, Bobby Simmons, Tom O'Farrell and Colin Dunn were still fighting away. I think Colin Dunn got a poor run out of the Robert chicane last time through. Side by side for the lead once again. It will be the inside for the Craner curves, will go to James Black, but then it will be the outside for the old hairpin. Got to be careful not to run too wide, but of course Gary Preble has to give him the room on the exit. Braking early there, James Black should open up the corner, potentially carry some more momentum up towards Schwantz curve, and only time will tell. It looks like Bobby Simmons has built up enough of a margin to the cars behind to somewhat secure third place for the rest of this lap, at least, barring any further mistakes. But Gary Preble, that lead that he had just a few laps ago, has massively been cut into by James Black, and he's making his intentions known. That was Bobby Simmons pushing hard. You can tell he's desperately trying to catch the sparring duo up the road, and I've got a feeling that could be quite an easy task because they're fighting very, very hard. I've been monitoring the gap, and at the moment that's James Black working his way up the inside, got a good run out of Coppice. Down the Starkey straight he will go. It will be the inside for the final couple of corners, but all of a sudden Gary Preble has got a bit of overspeed down that back straight. Who's going to be last of the late breakers? James Black, you see the nose dive down using all of the curb, but is that going to compromise his exit? For the moment, Yes, it will. Gary Preble, once again, you could visually see that gap coming down, so he'll be drafting all the way down the start-finish straight and into Redgate, who only knows will be in the lead.
Yeah, so James Black will ensure that he hugs that all-important right-hand side of the circuit, and that will afford him the inside line heading into towards Redgate Corner. Gary Preble will try and cut back on the exit, but it is a former kart racer who we also saw racing in the Junior Saloon Car Championship, and most recently has been in the Brit Car Endurance Trophy that still continues to lead the race. James Black leading the way, the Castle Combe specialist, Gary Preble right on his bumper, and I think just beginning to close in all of the time are the cars behind, because the leading pair were 135.6, 135.9 respectively, James Black and Gary Preble last time. Bobby Simmons in third place was almost a second quicker than the race leader, so they are definitely holding each other up yet now. Now you can't quite see Bobby Simmons closing in the background, but he's chipping away at the lead advantage. There is still just over a second gap between himself and the pair ahead. But Bobby Simmons is on his way, and more importantly, he's bringing with him Tom O'Farrell, still there in fourth place.
Yeah, absolutely. When we were monitoring the gap this time last lap, it was 1.6 seconds between Bobby Simmons and Gary Preble. It's now down to under 1 second, so he's well and truly there. I'm not sure how far the slipstream effect will go, so maybe he's picking up a little bit of draft assistance. Tom O'Farrell is well and truly there, so we could see 4 cars all fighting over the lead, very equidistantly spread at the moment. Colin Dunn isn't really out of the mix in 5th place. He is still there. He has been setting some personal best sectors. Very wide on the exit of the final corner there was Tom O'Farrell. So 5 cars almost fighting over the lead. And then we've got a bit of a jump back to everybody else. There's some nice breathing room back there, but there is also some battles going on. You can see on the lap prior, that was Nathan Down and Nick Creed swapping positions, as well as Alex Walker and Rhys Atkins. So there's still battles going on elsewhere on circuit, but at the moment we've got Jamie Peters-Ennis into the pit lane, so maybe an early pit stop from himself. Didn't quite see that coming in this early. Rhys Atkins also into the pit lane as well, so maybe some contact between the pair of those two, but at the moment it's sort of 2 by 2 for the first 4 positions. James Black and Gary Preble fighting away, but then we look a little bit further back. We've now got Nick Creed, and is that Scott Thorne in there as well? No, that's Nick Creed and Nathan Down fighting away as side by side in the background as well, in towards the old hairpin. Who's going to get out on top of this one? Almost contact between the pair of them. I think there was a little bit of a rush, a bit of a brush, but that was Nick Creed losing out. Nathan Down running wide. Nathan Down, he's made that move stick.
Yeah, Nathan Down just about hanging on to the place there. Nick Creed maybe realised that he just took his nose a little bit too far up the inside and just backed out of the throttle, so he didn't gain the position. There's another good fight going on behind them as well, as Greg Giles is coming under pressure from, that will be Eric Bolton, the man that sits behind Eric, who's been racing the things like Vauxhall Tigra silhouettes in the past, but also stepped up and raced in the Ginetta Super Cup over the course of this year. Eric Bolton, a man we've also seen out racing in the Classic Sports Car Club Tin Top Series as well, when he used to have a very indecently quick Honda Civic in that one. This fight that we're looking at now is between those two, so it is Giles from Bolton, 14th and 15th positions overall. Greg Giles just about having enough room, so he doesn't need to worry too much as they dive their way onto the brakes and flick their way in towards the right and left of the Roberts chicane, and they're about to come over the start finish line and complete another lap of the 1.957 miles Donington Park National Circuit.
Yeah, one thing to note as well, Tom O'Farrell just dived into the pit lane. I think he was in 5th or 4th place as he went in, so in nice and early. James Black is around about half a second to the good ahead of Gary Preble. He's managed to work his way in front and just build up enough room to just to feel somewhat comfortable, but he's well and truly there. Didn't get the greatest run out of the old hairpin. That's now down to 0.3 of a second. Bobby Simmons still not too far adrift. We'll keep an eye on this lead battle. One car diving very hard on the brakes, and then maybe down 1 too many gears as well. You can hear the rev spike in towards McLean's. Going off the timing, I'd probably say that was Gary Preble. He did lose a little bit of time through Coppice Corner. They will go on towards the back straight. Who got the better run out of the two? Looking at the timings, I would say James Black again. Gary Preble losing out on the exit, but will the draft help him down the straight? It looks like he might just be gaining a little bit of time in towards the final chicane, but nowhere near the time that he needs to think about proposing a move for the lead. James Black still leading the way, bouncing over the curbs, hearing the rev spike once again. Gary Preble looked like he got the better run of the two. Yes, he did. The timing's coming down once again, but I don't believe he will be close enough. So these top three, equidistantly spread, just happy to sit away at the front. And one thing I've noticed looking at the track map, traffic could very quickly become a deciding factor in this battle.
Yeah, I've not seen any traffic as yet. Now, there were a few overtakes at Oschersleben in the practice race on Wednesday night. There were also a few comments with regards to slower drivers trying to get out of the way, but it's up to the quicker drivers to find their way past. And the difficult thing is when everybody's got the same power, unless the lap car really does move offline or get off the throttle, it is difficult to pass. Now, through the old hairpin they'll go. Great camera angle. We're watching the right front wheel of Gary Preble's car as he begins to close in on James Black ever more. You can see him picking up the toe as they head up towards Schwantz curve, so he sneaks his way through on the left-hand side for Schwantz, but that's the outside line when they head up towards what will be the right-hander at Coppice. So Gary Preble, I don't quite think he's going to do it here. His best bet is to try and cut back on the exit, see if he might get a better run towards Coppice, but that's not going to happen. And all of a sudden, getting closer and closer and closer to them is Bobby Simmons, who's there almost with them now in third place. He's maybe an extra half a car length back, but he's going to get the toe as they head onto the national straight this time through. So it is going to be 3 for the lead, with the first quarter of the race now having gone.
Yeah, it seems like Gary Preble wants to be nice and patient and just sit behind, but James Black going defensive forces him to think about the move, and that just costs them yet more time. Bobby Simmons well and truly close enough this time, bouncing over the curbs. Who gets the better run out of the final chicane? It looks like everybody got a very, very similar run. You could just see a bit of traffic up the road there. I can't quite pick out exactly who that is. I think that's Martin Carpenter just slightly further up the road, but at the moment it's still James Black leading the way. Bobby Simmons using all of the pit exit that he can. Here's a battle a little bit further back on the right hand side of your screen now. Heading in towards the final chicane goes Nick Creed. He's trying to mount yet further advances to work his way through and past. I'll try and pick out exactly who that is. I think that's Nathan Down just a little bit further up the road, and Tom O'Farrell, after spending a lot of time in the top three, diving into the pit lane. He's now come out in a bit of traffic and a battle as well, so this is the last thing he wants. It's going to cost him lots and lots of time, and I've got a feeling Gary Preble has lost lots and lots of time as well, because Bobby Simmons is well and truly on the coattails. 3 wide down the Craner curves. That's never going to work. 2 cars clatter into each other. They both go their separate ways, but just about manage to stay on the road. This is the last thing Tom O'Farrell wants, having, like I said, spent plenty of time in that top 3. In towards the old hairpin they will go. Nick Creed is now not only trying to work his way past Nathan Down, but also Tom O'Farrell. So 3 cars all fighting over what is now 10th place, but one of them has already been in the pit lane.
Yeah, well, Tom O'Farrell at this stage, he won't want to slow down at all. He will want to try and make sure he doesn't lose any time. And if he can squeeze his way through and past these cars, which arguably he's quicker because he was ahead of them before he pitted. On the left of your screens, Gary Preble coming under enormous pressure, heading in towards Roberts from Bobby Simmons, who couldn't quite unlock the door to second place. He's going to try and get a good exit coming off the corner. There's the back marker that you can see, the blue car just heading up towards Redgate corner. That is Martin Carpenter, who for the moment remains on the lead lap of the race, and James Black for the first time has a little bit of breathing space in the lead of the race as Gary Preble gets the job done heading in towards Redgate corner. Gary Preble back into second, and Bobby Simmons very wide coming out of the corner, rally crossing his way back onto the Donington Park tarmac. He's down to 3rd position and has lost time as a result of that moment there at Redgate corner. The difficult thing is, Jack, you lose that time, it takes an age to try and close back in again.
Yeah, it's so tricky, because of course you lose just like I said earlier, even if it's just 2 or 3 mile an hour that you lose, you're going to carry that with you all the way to the next corner until you dive on the brakes once again. There's been yet more shuffling of the order further down. Tom O'Farrell has managed to work his way back to the front of that trio, still followed there by Nathan Down and Nick Creed. Nick Creed being the meat in the sandwich at this point, but Nathan Down is trying to swap positions. Just about got on the brakes in time. Like you said earlier on, as soon as you see that gap open, you want to go for it, but you're all working with very similar machinery, so it's very tricky to outbrake the car in front, especially in towards the old hairpin. A very, very fast right-hander before an uphill section, so the last thing you want to do is compromise your line. You can see there Nathan Down compromised his line on the way in, and the gap then formed between himself and Nick Creed. At the moment, Tom O'Farrell is this will be music to his ears. He'll be looking in the rearview mirror, seeing the cars behind battling away. That means that they should lose a bit of time, and he can focus forward and trying to work towards Scott Thorne. There's still more shuffling of the order in the background. We've seen a couple of mistakes from drivers just running wide, very easily done in these cars. For the moment, it looks like Nathan Down, with that very minimal time loss on the exit of the old hairpin, look at how much time that has now accumulated to as we head on towards the start-finish straight once again.
Yeah, the thing is, we don't know how this is all going to pan out quite as yet. Frank Frostick, who is there, busy fighting away. That's with Tom Bunton. That's for 15th and 16th position. Of course, we don't know how many litres of fuel all of these cars started with. Those that pitted early, you would assume, had maybe started with a lighter tank. Those that are going to stay out towards the tail end of the window. Remember, there's still another 30 minutes of the pit window being open. Yet it only closes with 10 minutes of the race to go. Will arguably have a quicker pit stop because they'll need to put less fuel in. But also it depends on what they do with tyres, Jack. Now, in theory, the tyres you would have thought would go for the full 60 minutes in this simulation without too much problem. But Donington Park enormously loads up the left front tyre. So if there's too much deterioration of that, some of the drivers might opt just to stick a new left front on, or maybe stick new tyres on the left-hand side, and that will take longer in the pits.
Yeah, it will indeed, but then you've also got to figure out how fuel will affect the handling of the car, because of course the more fuel you burn, the lighter the tail end of the car gets, so you won't have to put in as much work on the on that front left tyre, but of course you will still be loading it up. There's so many different things you've got to think about. Riding on board now with Ollie Riggs for Extreme Racing. He's closing very close to the tail of Jack Mace. Lifts off though, so this is what we talked about earlier on. This could just be two drivers working together, so this could be Ollie Riggs and Jack Mace trying to work their way in towards the top five. The first target for them will be Joe Kingston Lee. You can see the bright blue machine just slightly further up the road. We will watch once again down towards turn one we go. Still on board with Ollie Riggs. Will he lift out once again? Has a little bit of a look, just filling the mirrors, but no, lifts off and then dives on the brakes. So clever driving from Ollie. He's letting Jack Mace know he's there, but he isn't really putting on too much pressure, so hopefully he doesn't lose too much time. Tom O'Farrell setting his personal fastest lap of the race, so desperately pushing forward. Now he's managed to get rid of the attentions of Nathan Down and Nick Creed behind. It looks like the lead duo have managed to open up a bit of a margin. There's not too much separating themselves and Bobby Simmons still, but Bobby Simmons, of course, we saw him lose a heap of time slightly earlier on, and now you can see 1.3 seconds the gap between himself and the lead duo, so the lead duo of James Black and Gary Preble have just settled into a rhythm and are working forward. Like you say, there's still plenty of time to think about strategy. There they are now. So there is Gary Preble. He's still within touching distance, but now are we seeing two drivers virtually communicate, saying, come on, let's get rid of the car behind and then worry about battling later on into the race.
Yeah, communication's a point we haven't covered as yet as well. Depending on which series you're in and the structure of how the communication exists, you can in race chat to some drivers if you wish to. In this server that we've got going, not at all. It's one-way communication from race control to the drivers. They cannot talk back to race control, and there's no driver-to-driver conversations that can go on in-game. If everybody's in the correct channel, only race control can chat to the drivers to let them know when pit window is open, when pit window is closed, if there's a safety car coming out, if there's a safety car going to go back into the pit lane. So one-way communication, which is not the case with many other esports series as well. For the lead of the race, James Black still pushing hard at this stage. They're lapping 1 minute 34.1, which is their best laps that they've done. 1 minute 34.1 even last time through for Gary Preble with a bit of a tow. So we've seen no drop off in the pace when they're pushing as hard as they can in the first 23 minutes of this race so far. So again, out of the little kink at Starkey's Bridge, up towards the kink at at Schwann's Curve, pick up the curb on the left hand side, get the car braked in a straight line, down one gear, pitch it in towards the apex at McLean's Corner, run all of the curb on the way out into the blind entry double apex right-hander at Coppice. You pick up the first apex, don't worry about the second at all, let the car drift towards the middle of the circuit and then pick up the tow from the car ahead, shift up through the gears. 14 laps completed. They're on lap number 15 at the moment, and the lead advantage is still hovering around a quarter of a second at this stage between James Black and Gary Preble.
Yeah, absolutely nothing to pick between the pair of them. Gary Preble not going for the move as of yet, just following as closely as he can, using all of the curb. One thing to note as well, in towards McLean's, you can use all of that inside curb, but if you use too much, there is quite a nasty drop off from the top of the curb. You've probably got about half a foot until you end up touching the next solid thing, so you'll end up bottoming out the car, losing heaps of time, 2 fast laps once again. Both drivers, James Black and Gary Preble, setting their personal fastest lap of the race, and setting the overall fastest lap of the race was once again the driver in second place, Gary Preble, at 1 minute 34.070, only 300ths quicker than James Black. We do have a car off halfway down the National Straight. That's Glenn Copeland. I'm not 100% sure what's happened. He is out of the way and not in the firing line, but that car is sat stationary, so maybe something to think about for the other drivers already.
Yeah, the Treacy Pop Motorsport car pointing in the wrong direction. So for the moment, that will just be indicated by a localised yellow for our drivers. We're looking at the moment at Gary Preble, who is looking to try and reassert himself back into the lead of the race that's been held by James Black. He's doing all of the right things, set the fastest lap of the race last time through. He's also quicker than he's previously gone through the first sector of this particular lap. There's more traffic just up the road as well that they need to deal with before too much longer. Now, that won't come into play just as yet, or it might, because it's sitting in the wrong place at the wrong point for them. Blind entry to Coppice Corner, another car pointing in the wrong direction that thankfully has recovered onto the grass and got itself pointing back round the correct way. But a heart-stopping moment there for James Black, because he might not have seen, Jack, a lot of that car until he crested the hill and the rise on the way into Coppice Corner, and at that point he pretty much committed.
Yeah, absolutely, and I'm sure probably even scarier for Gary Preble, because he will have been focusing on the car in front, and that car in front might have gone one way in avoidance, and you're left sat there a passenger and trying to figure out what you're going to do. Very, very sideways is Eric Bolton, put the rear axle on the grass, flicks the car one way, flicks the car the other, purely trying to get it recovered, does the right thing, lets off the brakes, gets the car out of the racing line and on towards the exit curve. But Eric Bolton, a very scary moment. Drivers are already getting caught out, a few mistakes creeping in, most of them on the exit of Coppice Corner, so that could be an indication of tyres letting go, fuel dropping out the car, the rear axle getting lighter, and of course we're still well within that pit window. Running very wide there is Gary Preble. That will cost him plenty of time through Starkey's Bridge and on the run up towards Schwantz and McLean's. Bobby Simmons is sort of there or thereabouts. I think he's losing a little bit of time here and there, but he's still in third place. The most important bit that that's probably more comfortable for him, to be honest, because he's not in a battle. He can just focus on turning his own laps, and if the lead duo do come together, the race is going to get thrown back his way. Here is Scott Thorne. I think he maybe has already been into the pit lane. He's returned to the circuit in 13th place, but just ahead of Jamie Peters, and it's a car bouncing off the limiter in towards the old hairpin. He's stuck in a battle with that's Nathan Down and all of the following drivers. Frank Frostick, Tom Bunton losing out. Yeah, there's so many drivers. All just I can't really keep up. I don't really know where to put myself. There's so many battles going on.
Yeah, the man, as you mentioned, Scott Thorne, who's just come out of the pit lane, pushing hard at the wheel of car number 199. He raced in the 750 Motor Club Renault Clio Sports 182 series a few seasons ago. Did a little bit of BMW Compact Cup as well, and at the moment he's managed to sneak his way through and ahead of Tom Bunton. So the Grid Finder car losing a place, running very wide, and that was Nathan Down that had a problem. He's not the only car that has had the problem. There's another car rally crossing its way back onto the tarmac as well. I think that was the Hastings-backed car, wasn't it, that was getting its way back on towards the tarmac. But this is a really, really good battle being headed by Frank Frostick at the moment. So this is 10th, 11th, 12th and 13th places. A little tap there as Tom Bunton caught the tail end of the car just ahead of him, which just unsettled it, but it all was gathered up. But this is a brilliant, brilliant fight. Jamie Peters-Ennis is now having to go defensive on the run up towards Redgate Calder. He is desperate to try and hang on to 11th position, but he's under enormous pressure. Tom Bunton, Scott Thorne and Nathan Down are all queuing up behind.
Yeah, I'm sure it would be quite a confusing experience in these KAs, because 1 minute you can look in your rearview mirror and see one car, and then the next corner you'll look in your rearview mirror, decide whether you need to defend, and it could be 3 cars all filling your mirror. So it's very, very tricky to sort of keep track of the race, not only as the commentator sat here in the booth, but I'm sure as the drivers as well. We saw Callum Perfect go very wide on the exit of Coppice once again. So that's what 3 or 4 drivers we've all seen get caught out. Back to the lead battle on the right hand side of your screen. It's still James Black leading the way from Gary Preble, but that gap has sort of stayed as it is. I think some drivers quicker at some parts and others quicker at others. So it's I've been watching the gap between the pair of them. It's undulating quite nicely. It can get down to about 1/10 of a second, then expands to 3, maybe even 4/10 of a second. But the left-hand side of the screen, however, that's where it's all going off at the moment. Tom Bunton probably not where he wants to be. He can't decide whether to go forward or backward. But then we've got a car off. That's Frank Frostick. Yeah, and again on the exit of Coppice.
Yeah, so Frank Fosdick comes a little bit unstuck there, so maybe Fosdick needs a bit of Bostic on those times just to keep him where he needs to be, but that's a man who's dropped his way down through the order in towards the braking area for the Robert chicane. Jamie Peters-Ennis is now the man that is at the sharp end of this fantastic squabble. Tom Bunton runs a little bit wide, that will compromise his exit speed coming out of the Robert chicane, so Scott Thorne trying to draw himself alongside, but he's on the left-hand side, so to driver's left of Tom Bunton, and that's the wrong place to be when you head in towards Redgate Corner. Back to the lead of the race, it's still James Black from Gary Preble. The one thing we don't know, Jack, mid-race, as we get towards the halfway point of this race, we don't know which drivers will have picked up any time penalties for corner cuts. Now, it doesn't show you in-game as a race driver in the format that we're running. When you cut the corner, if you do be deemed to have a cut based on the algorithms in Assetto Corsa, your first one is free, your second one is free, but every other one thereafter is a 5-second penalty, and those penalties are only applied at the end of the race. And even some parts of our virtual Donington Park, you don't trigger that cut. So even when we see the results at the end of this race, they're still going to be provisional, aren't we, until any further corner cuts have been looked into and amended results made if necessary.
Yeah, absolutely, and you'd be surprised how easy it is to run wide in these cars. You think you're not going at like earth-shattering speeds, but that's exactly the point. You're trying to conserve your speed as best you can, and that can just mean you go slightly too fast into a corner, which I think is what James Black fell foul of there, in towards Redgate. It allowed Gary Preble just to work his way up the inside. It'll be the outside for the Craner curves, but it will swap back to the inside for the old hairpin. If he's later on the brakes, he might be able to get the car slowed down, but sweeping right across the nose, carrying all that extra momentum, goes James Black, and that should hopefully help him all the way up the hill, and then that brings the lead margin back out once again. But then there's traffic to think about just slightly further up the road that gets very nicely out of the way, so clever driving from the drivers that are getting the blue flags. But at the moment, Gary Preble, it's gone from the lead hopeful to now trying to catch the lead driver once again. 0.8 of a second. We've seen them literally nose to tail, side by side, and 0.8 of a second in the blink of an eye.
I think we've also just seen more recently potentially a new fastest lap of the race going the way of Tom O'Farrell, as he is there in 7th place at the moment, but he's just dropped in a couple of laps ago, 1 minute 34.040, which I think by about 3/100ths of a second would give him the fastest lap of the race. Now, he was one of the early ones to pit, wasn't he? Jamie Peters-Ennis flashing his lights to try and forewarn slower cars, and he wants to try and pick his way through. Traffic trying to stay out of harm's way as they thread their way up towards what is McLean's corner. Next car that will want to also try and sneak his way through is going to be Scott Thorne. Now, Scott Thorne needs to make sure that he's nice and clean because he's got other cars around him, desperate to try and take positions away if they can. And Scott Thorne coming under pressure from Nathan Down, who is sat right on his coattails as they come out of Coppice Corner. And Nathan Down this time looks as though he gets a much better run than Scott Thorne, and that is going to put Nathan Down inside the top 10 if he can get the job done. He's almost alongside, but he's got the all-important inside line as they head in towards the braking area for the Robert chicane. And as we go to the blimp camp, yet through goes Nathan Down, a little bit of a touch just on the way into the corner, which doesn't unsettle the car too much. Nathan Down gets himself into the top 10.
He does indeed, and that could be really crucial for him, because that means he can focus his attentions on Jamie Peters-Ennis, try and work his way forward and get into that draft. You can see all of the drivers using as much of the pit exit road as possible to open up Redgate. Turning in slightly early there was Scott Thorne, a very easy thing to do, running wide as well because of the extra momentum. That could slowly bring him closer to the tail end of Nathan Down, having just promoted himself up in towards the top 10. That's already coming back under pressure. Nose to tail down towards the old hairpin. Scott Thorne looked to the left, he's now looking back to the right. He might have to scrub the tyres to try and get the car alongside, but decides to stay just in the coattails through the old hairpin. Up the hill, gets the better run, but he's going to run wide with all of that extra momentum, but it has allowed the door to be open, so Scott Thorne back up in towards the top 10. Nathan Down, after an incredibly hard-fought battle, he's now back down into 11th, flashing the lights in frustration as if to say, hang on a minute, I was just there, what are you doing? So Scott Thorne back into 10th place. That's Nathan Down, like I say, back into 11th. But I don't think that's the end of that battle.
I don't think it's the end of it, and I suspect that the cuts might be totting up as well with some of the transgressions of circuit limits in the usual places as you get them in the real racing as well. You know, EnduroKA's at Donington, it's usually the Robert Chicane or the exit of Redgate or the exit of the Old Hairpin where you get track limits infringements, and it's no different in the sim as well, and that was exactly what happened there. So if advantage was deemed to be gained, then a penalty could well be applied. To the right of your screen, this is a good fight that's going on for 13th position as things currently stand, and that is going to be Tom Bunton, who is looking to try and get himself ahead of David Evans, but is equally as conscious, and he's got the recovering Eric Bolton sitting right behind him as well. Or no, Eric Bolton's just that little bit further back by the look of things. So it's David Evans, Tom Bunton, then a back marker car, and then it will be Eric Bolton thereafter. So they're not quite all squabbling for position. So Tom Bunton doing a really good job in the Grid Finder car, one of our supporters of the EnduroKA Winter Sim Series, along with the likes of Positive Perception, MSVT Racing, EnduroKA themselves, and of course our sponsors for this series, Burton Power as well. So we are past the halfway point of this race. James Black still leads the way, but only just. There's about a second between himself and Gary Preble for the lead.
Yeah, absolutely nothing to pick between them. Like we say, the battles that we've seen on circuit, they either go one way or the other. The two drivers stick together and work their way forward, or they go completely the opposite direction. One driver drives away and the other one's sat there picking up the pieces, trying to work their way forward. But we've already seen plenty of mistakes being made. You can see there Tom Bunton very sideways on the way into the corner, but like you said, that is definitely a driving style in these KAs. To minimise the braking, you can just chuck the car in, screw a bit of speed with the rear axle and then continue forward. I think that was Callum Perfect once again running wide on the exit of McLean's. Very easily done as well. If you take a little bit too much curb, it's quite a perceptive corner. You think you can take a bit more speed than you actually can, and it's very easy to run wide. There is Colin Dunn, currently sat there in 6th place. Tom O'Farrell back up to 5th, having already been in the pit lane, so definitely doing what he needs to do. He hasn't really got to worry about working his way back through the order, so doing everything he needs to do. But Colin Dunn trying to work his way in towards the top 5. Jack Mace not too far adrift at the moment. I'm just looking to see where the closest drivers are out on circuit. The start-finish straight is a very busy place to be indeed, looking at the track map. Seems like half the grid are all fighting their way in towards Redgate Corner, but I think Scott Thorne is still trying to work his way past Jamie Peters-Ennis for 9th place now, having worked his way past Nathan Down. He's now focused forward, like I said, on Jamie Peters-Ennis, and it looks like everything's going Scott's way because he's nearly there. Back to the lead we go, though.
Yeah, so Gary Preble still trying to hunt down James Black. Neither of these cars have pitted just as yet, with 23 minutes remaining. There's still, 13 and a bit minutes of the pit window remaining open. But Bobby Simmons from 3rd place heads towards the pit lane. In the background, the 3rd place car dives into the pit lane. So that is Bobby Simmons in. Now, the leading car that had pitted prior to Bobby Simmons was Tom O'Farrell. So we'll have to see how quickly Bobby Simmons can get back out onto track. Is he going to come back out ahead of Tom O'Farrell, or might he fall behind him and into the clutches of other cars that have pitted? Colin Dunn, Jack Mace, Ollie Ricks, Jamie Peters-Ennis and Scott Thorne, all of whom have also pitted. So it's only the leading 3 cars now within the top 10 that haven't pitted. James Black, Gary Preble, and a little bit further back from them is Joe Kingston Lee, who sits there in 3rd place. But he's about 15 seconds adrift of this leading pair, who are still absolutely bumper to bumper. And again, Gary Preble's looking for the inside line on the left of your screens as they head up towards Schwantz Curve. He'll draw himself alongside James Black, having just gone quicker through the first sector than anybody has managed in the race so far, and now he's looking to try and draw himself alongside on the run up towards Coppice Corner. Can he make it stick this time? He's got the inside line. Is James Black going to give him room? Bounce over the curb from Gary Preble. He's still trying to hug that inside line to draw himself alongside, but James Black has just enough momentum heading onto the exhibition straight to pick up and still hang on to the lead of the race as they close in on more traffic ahead.
Yeah, clever driving once again from Gary Preble. He prized the door open on the run up towards Coppice Corner, but then of course you've got to be very wary. If you're on the inside, you're not quite going to have the run off and the space just to run as wide as you usually would, because of course James Black would be there. Braked slightly earlier there did Gary Preble, and diving into the pit lane very last minute. It was a late decision from himself, so with only 22 minutes of the race remaining, that has left James Black out and into the lead on his own, so he doesn't really have to worry about too much pressure from behind now. So Gary Preble, it'll be interesting to see whereabouts he's come out. Bobby Simmons has returned to the circuit in 4th place. Tom O'Farrell remains in 5th, but now with an 8.5-second deficit to the car in front. So all of that battling in the mid-pack has cost him stacks of time. He was nose to tail as Bobby Simmons went into the pit lane, but 8.5 seconds, that shows how important the pit strategy will be. Yet more cars diving to the pit lane later on in this race, but now, of course, Bobby Simmons has got to deal with a little bit of traffic whilst also trying to work his way into 3rd place, because Joe Kingston-Lee is that car in front, the 888 machine, bright blue one, very difficult to miss. 2 very bright cars indeed, but of course they've got a little bit of traffic just slightly further up the road to deal with, so it's going to be a busy job fighting over that final step on the podium.
Yeah, but Joe Kingston-Lee hasn't pitted as yet, whereas Bobby Simmons has. So at some point, the blue car with the yellow flashes to it is going to have to dive for the pit lane. And if I were Joe Kingston-Lee with a bit of traffic just ahead, I would probably do it at the end of this lap. He almost forced Bobby Simmons wide there, but Bobby kept his foot in round the outside at Schwantz, grabs the inside line for McLean's corner. Through goes Bobby Simmons into what will be 3rd position. Joe Kingston-Lee down into 4th, still as yet needing to pit at this stage. So we've so far had, 24 laps completed by our race leader. So we're on lap number 25 at the moment. Just about a third of the race still to go. Jamie Peters-Ennis still busy squabbling away with Scott Thorne that sits behind him. This will be for the final 2 places inside the top 10. Jamie, who's done a chunk of sim racing in the past, has been a regular around motorsport, either working with Sussex Road and Race or has been pit lane commentator for Fun Cup for a good number of years, but has never actually raced cars. He's hoping to complete a race at some point in the 2023 championship season. And another thing that's well worth mentioning as well, Jack, people wanting to come into motorsport, you need to do your ARDS course at the Association of Racing Drivers Schools before you can get a competition license. Well, prizes on offer for the winners of the EnduroKA Winter Sim Sport Series, and 3 ARDS courses are being given away as prizes.
Yeah, a great prize as well to a great paddock of people. Of course, there's lots of people on this grid, like you say, a massive raft of ability, and some, if not most, don't have their ARDS license. So why not? It's a perfect way to get into motorsport. And of course, motorsport isn't cheap. So if you can minimise that cost by winning yourself an ARDS test or an ARDS license, then why not? Absolutely go for it. It'll be great to see more drivers work their way onto the grid. But then there are other ways of working their way into motorsport as well. I think we do have a marshal out this evening, I think, racing
Chris Humphries,
yeah, and of course that's definitely the cheapest, but probably one of the closest ways you can get to motorsport and pick up a little bit of knowledge along the way as well.
And you think of the drivers we've had racing in EnduroKA in the past. You know, I've done a couple of races in the past, and I've been on the grid with the likes of former British Touring Car champion Rob Gravitt, Nick Tandy, Le Mans winner with Porsche, all of whom have raced in EnduroKA, and all of whom do the same as everybody ever does in the real car: get out with the most enormous, huge smile on your face. James Black, race leader, is in. So the race leader has come into the pit lane. Now, strategy-wise, maybe a little bit less fuel, not much, but a little bit less fuel to put in than Gary Preble. But it looks as though Gary Preble is probably going to exit the pit lane and take up the lead of the race. Bobby Simmons in 2nd position, Joe Kingston-Lee in 3rd, and James Black, is he going to be there in 4th? I think he will be, yet. So it didn't quite work, the strategy for James Black. The pit stop was longer, and he is down into 4th position. He's got work to do, and only 18 minutes in which to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe one free position is all he can get out of this, because of course Joe Kingston-Lee still yet to pit. He's only got 8 minutes before the pit window closes, so he'll have to make sure he uses that time wisely. Like you say, if he's closing up on a big sort of herd of KAs, you can just dive into the pit lane, save yourself all of that lost time and get into the pit lane, and then it'll be interesting to see whereabouts he comes out. Tom O'Farrell still not making massive inroads on the car in front. Back to the battle we were looking at earlier. This is Scott Thorne still applying the pressure on Jamie Peters-Ennis for 9th place. There is a car slightly further behind, but I think that is lap traffic, so nothing major to worry about. I can't see that being David Evans, but it could potentially be, because 4.4 seconds, I wouldn't say that is the gap between the pair of them. But for the moment, bouncing over the curbs and very, very sideways in the background, who is that has spun the wrong way? We'll try and pick out exactly who that is. I can't see it initially. That looks like Nick Creed potentially has fallen foul of the exit. Martin Carpenter, pardon me, has fallen foul of the runoff on the exit of the old hairpin. But this battle, it seems like it's evolving just at a slower rate than we were expecting. We've seen them side by side and trading a little bit of paint, but for the moment, they're staying nose to tail.
Yep, so they're still pretty much together, aren't they? Jamie Peters-Ennis hanging on to 9th position. Scott Ford sitting there in 10th place. On the right of your screens, you can also see Nathan Down fighting away with Frank Frosting's car. That's going to be now for 17th and 18th position as Nathan Down goes through on the way into the corner. Frank Frosting bounces over the curbs on the apex of McLean's corner and is trying to sneak his way back up the inside as they head in towards the right-hander at Coppice. Is Frank going to go through? There's a bit of a touch between the pair of them. They both gather up the moment and will continue, and they'll also continue their battle because they still remain side by side despite the contact. And on the left of your screen, Scott Thorne was almost alongside Jamie Peters-Ennis, and he is alongside, swings his way all the way around the outside at Redgate Corner. Can he make it stick on the way out of the corner? He runs a little bit wide. I think he's not quite going to do it, is he? Jamie Peters-Ennis is just going to still be alongside him as they head down through the Crater Curves. Brilliant racing all the way through the order.
Yeah, they are still side by side, but the inside will go to Scott Thorne for the Crater Curves. The inside will then swap to Jamie Peters, and it's almost contact between the pair of them. A little flick of oversteer, but I think over-compromised his line there, did Scott Thorne on the run through the old hairpin. Up the hill they will go, through Starkeys Bridge and Schwantz Curve, all over the rear bumper there. Got to be careful not to move too many times in defence. Back to the battle we were looking at earlier. This is Nathan Down in 17th place, battling away with, is that Frank Frosting?
Frank Frosting, yeah.
Yeah, Frank Frosting, I believe so. The battle on the left-hand side of your screen has remained as is, but in towards the old hairpin, almost contact once again between the pair of them. They both managed to carry on. Nathan Down using all of the runoff and a little bit more, so that would be an off-track gain for him, I believe, or a track extension. A little bit of traffic coming into play, contact between the pair of them. I'm not 100% sure what happened there, whether that was Nathan Down trying to give up some some gained time that he got from running wide, but Frank Frosting, unsighted, unknown as to what was happening, hit the tail end of Nathan Down, but has managed to almost make that position back on the run round Coppice we will go. So still side by side. I've got to say, I think that's a full rotation, a full 1.95 mile rotation of Donington Park. These two drivers have been side by side, and somehow Nathan Down is still in 17th place.
Yeah, brilliant stuff, isn't it? And this is absolutely what you see in the real EnduroKA series as well. Hard racing, side-by-side racing, fair racing as well. And that's why it attracts so many people year on year on year to dip their toe in the motorsport water. Here's Colin Dunn at the wheel of the Positive Perception with Dunn Motorsport EnduroKA. Now, Colin is running just outside of the top 6 at the moment. The multicoloured car ahead of him is Jack Mace, who is in 6th position. So there's a very close little battle for the final place inside the top 6 at the moment. We've still got 4 minutes of the pit window to go, and as things stand, there are still 2 cars that haven't pitted. David Evans has not pitted, he's running in 11th position, and also Eric Bolton, who is running in 12th position, has also not pitted as well. So those are 2 cars that still at some point in the next 3 minutes and a bit of change will need to dive their way in towards the pit lane. So Jack Mace under pressure from Colin Dunn. They're about to come up towards the conclusion of what will be lap number 30 for them, I think, this time through the right and the left flicks at the Robert chicane, and they'll accelerate their way over the start-finish line. Another pit stopper in the background is diving in, and that is going to be Costa C, who is into the pit lane. Well, that was another car that was running outside of the top 25. There's contact further back by the look of things, and Jamie Peters-Ennis and Scott Thorne finally get together. They've been wheel to wheel, lap after lap after lap without any contact, and finally something had to give. They've both had a spin. Eric Bolton weaves his way past them whilst they recover from the moment, and that will put Eric Bolton now inside the top 10. Rhys Atkins will move up potentially into the top 10 as well, whilst Jamie Peters-Ennis and Scott Thorne recover after their moment.
Yeah, it looked like it was destined to happen, having spent so long side by side. A little bit of trading pain, but eventually they came to blows, and both cars ended up on the runoff at the Robert chicane. As per, we normally see a little bit of contact, maybe a couple of cars pointing the wrong way at the exit of Coppice, but it seemed like that time it just had to come together at some point, and it did indeed on the exit of the Robert chicane. We're still seeing this battle here for 6th place between Colin Dunn and Jack Mace. They aren't too far apart at the moment, 12 minutes of the race remaining, just over. So Colin Dunn has got a little bit of time to play with, but not too much. Of course, traffic could still play a part, and then the differing strategies, who's looked after their tyres better. They should have a similar amount of fuel in the car, so this could all be down to who is the maybe the smoother, more consistent driver who can lap, even if they're lapping, what, 0.2 slower one lap, but if they can consistently lap at that point, that could just mean the difference between finishing 6th and 7th. There is James Black, former race leader, now down into 3rd place. Bobby Simmons up into 2nd. Gary Preble still leading the way. But at the moment, James Black has got a bit of work to do. You can see the purple and day-glow yellow car up the road of Bobby Simmons, and that is a lot of time to gain to, what, 3.7 seconds in around about 11.5 minutes. I'd say the main worry for Gary Preble would indeed be Bobby Simmons, because a good run on the exit of the old hairpin. Up the hill they will go through Schwantz Curve and McLean's, and Bobby Simmons, he's going very, very quickly in this latter stage of the race.
He's going very, very quickly, but he nearly needed to buy a re-entry ticket there. He was so wide coming out of the old hairpin, and that is what's allowed him to potentially close up. Now, they've got themselves back together again, right? A bit more contact. Scott Thorne gets bumped a little bit wide by Jamie Peters-Ennis. Virtually, they've still got both wing mirrors on these cars. You wouldn't have thought so if it were real racing, but brilliant racing it's been. It's been fair between them. There's always going to be a little bit of run because these cars are just so equally matched. And what they need to do is work together, if anything. Try and close up on that white car with the black and the red flash to it in the hands of Rhys Atkin that lies ahead. So brilliant fighting all the way through the order. We've now got, what, 10 minutes and a bit of change still to go. Has everybody pitted? Yes, they have. So everybody has completed the mandatory pit stop they need to do by the look of things. I can't see that anybody has not pitted as yet, other than Peter Jones, who retired many laps ago on the exit of Coppice Corner. We've not seen subsequently in the race. We ride on board with Scott Thorne. You couldn't see another car there, but Jamie Peters-Ennis, surprise, surprise, was right alongside him, and you can see the pair of them yet again are side by side as they head out of Coppice. I think in the last 10 minutes, Jack, they've probably been side by side more times than they've not been in reality.
Yeah.
And they're still together as they head up towards Roberts.
Yeah, but then you can see Jamie Peters-Ennis, whilst he didn't get the greatest run out of Coppice, he managed to get lots of overspeed heading onto the exhibition straight. He was on the inside. There's a car backwards on the entry to the final chicane. I couldn't quite pick out exactly who that was. Potentially Chris Humphreys has found himself up to strife at the Robert chicane, but at the moment Scott Thorne still looking to work his way through and past Jamie Peters-Ennis, but he hasn't quite got the best run heading down the start-finish straight. On the brakes for Redgate, tries to get the car turned in, parking on the apex for Jamie Peters-Ennis. Very defensive driving, manages to make it work and keep Scott Thorne behind, but Scott is all over the tail end of the number 46 machine, so desperately trying to work his way past. And Jamie Peters-Ennis is desperately trying to remain in 10th place. So this is all, you'd think this is the battle for the lead, but this is all fighting over who can remain in the top 10. So this is, like you say, exactly what you would see in the EnduroKA series.
Scott Thorne would be shouting at his monitor for Jamie Peters-Ennis to get out of the way, I'm sure. The one thing he won't want to do, though, is wake up his little baby daughter, Sophia, who'll be hoping will be well and truly asleep at the moment, whilst Dad's out there having a brilliant, probably fight of the race. Again, there's going to be a little bit of a touch between the pair of them. Jamie Peters-Ennis runs wide and gathers up the moment coming out of Coppice Corner. Lots of arms whirling. Is he going to lose the place? No, Scott Thorne, I think, backs out of it, realised there was a little bit of contact, takes a wider line in towards Coppice. Guess what? He's going to get a slightly tighter line coming out, which means, guess what? They'll be side by side yet again as they head down the straight. Now, keep an eye towards the tail end of them, because I think Nick Creed is edging up all of the time between this pair as they head in towards the Robert chicane. Jamie Peters-Ennis just had his nose ahead. Braver on the brakes was Scott Thorne. He manages to keep within the confines of the circuit, gets a good exit as also coming out of that Robert chicane. So all of a sudden, Scott Thorne now finds himself with a couple of car lengths gap between the car he was doing battle with, but Nick Creed wants in on the fun as well.
Yeah, Nick Creed got a great run out of the final corner. That just allowed him to close upon the tail end of Jamie Peters-Ennis. So Jamie Peters-Ennis will have to go from defence to defence, as where Scott Thorne will now have to go from attack potentially to defence. But you can see the battle behind is really going to distract the two cars. So everything's been thrown the way of Scott Thorne now, because he's managed to work his way through and past, built up a good margin straight away. And now Jamie Peters-Ennis is already occupied with Nick Creed behind. So once again, yet more battling in the mid-pack, exactly what you want to see. The lead margin has come out to, what, 2.4 seconds now, so nothing major going on at the top end of the affairs. But here we can see David Adams fighting away with Alex Saville in towards the old hairpin. It seems like the outside line through the old hairpin is definitely the way to go. You can carry a lot of momentum around the outside. A big moment in the background there. I think that was potentially two back. Oh no, it's Eric Bolton and the back marker that I think almost came together.
Yeah, Eric Bolton needs to take up rallycross. We've seen a lot of him on the grass in this one. It's David Evans racing for Semprini. Again, another driver that we've seen racing out in EnduroKA this year, amongst other things as well. They also race a Honda Civic quite regularly as well. And Semprini, they have the junior team as well, a bit like Red Bull junior team, Semprini Racing. We have junior teams in EnduroKA as well. Now, Nick Creed has decided he wants to take the place of Scott Thorne here. He saw how much fun it was running side by side with Jamie Peters-Ennis and wants to try and see whether he can emulate Scott Thorne and finally wiggle his way through. But if it's anything like Scott Thorne, there'll be a bit of a contact and a spin, and finally he'll pick his way through a few laps later on. But brilliant racing it has been, and amazingly, we've only got 6.5 minutes of this still to go. Gary Preble leading the way still, but now he leads by a very un-KA-like from what we've seen so far, nearly 3 seconds from the car of Bobby Simmons, who's there in second place. This is Frank Frostick. He's busy squabbling away, and this is going to be with Nathan Down at the wheel of the number 45 car that is to drivers right at the moment. And what place are they fighting over? 17th and 18th position. And again, we keep saying how much this is like typical KA racing. It's always the case, Jack, isn't it? If you have big grids of cars and they are all evenly matched, doesn't matter what your ability is, there's always going to be somebody to race with.
Yeah, you will never be bored, and that doesn't just apply to the drivers, that applies to the spectators as well. There will always be something to watch, and sometimes it's not even a battle for position. It could be a battle between a car on the lead lap and a car on maybe a couple of laps down, but then you'll see the trail car just sit behind, maybe learn something, catch up to some more back markers, and everybody gets caught in that. It's a great series to watch. You will never be bored watching the EnduroKA series, and I'm glad everything that you see in real life can correlate to what we're seeing in the simulator. It's amazing. It's crazy.
I was talking about the fastest lap in the April race of 2022 for the main EnduroKA series being a woman at 33.942. Fastest lap we've had in this race is a woman at 34.040. So virtually, in race conditions, these cars are only 0.114 of a second slower than they were around Donington Park in April of 2022.
Yeah, so that's after watching Frank Frostick battle away with Nathan Down. He's now it was all over the grass on the exit of Coppice, going down the exhibition straight. That will drop him behind Tom Bunton, so he's now got a bit of work to do to try and catch up to the tail end of Tom Bunton. Only 5 minutes to do so, and lap traffic between himself and the car in front. The lap traffic is now currently disposed in the gravel trap, so Frank Frostick, one less job to do, but he's still got to catch Tom Bunton. You just can't keep up. It's the fact we've been racing for over 55 minutes, and we're still seeing battles like we are.
Yeah, that's Jacob Cardani, I think, the Top With Motorsport car that had the big moment in ahead of, well, I'm going to call him Frank Bostic for the rest of the stream now, because he definitely needs to find a bit more grip out of those tyres, because he's had a couple of sideways moments as Frank. I know Frank quite well as well. He's a big Ford man as well as Frank, with the likes of Sierra Cosworths and Ford Escort Mark IIs amongst his collection as well. Jack Mace looking to try and apply the pressure, and is going to go through and ahead of a back marker car that stays out of harm's way, because Jack Mace needs to crack on with it. He's got Colin Dunn breathing down his tailpipe as things currently stand. And then in towards the pit lane, that was Ollie Ricks, was it not, that came in towards the pit lane at the wheel of the Rick Parfitt Jr. BTCC tribute liveried car.
Maybe under fuel, something to potentially think about, because of course you can do all the calculations you like, and I'm sure there are sort of secondary pieces of software that can calculate the fuel for you, but at the end of the day, if you get it wrong, you've got it wrong. You do have to dive into the pit lane and get that splash and dash before the end of the race. So it's sort of fallen apart there for Ollie Ricks this close to the end of the race. He's currently sat in 8th place, potentially 9th, because Rhys Atkin will already be breathing down his neck on the exit of the pit lane. Not quite as much as I thought, however, but at the moment Colin Dunn still under intense pressure from Jack Mace, who gets a good run all the way around the outside through Schwantz Curve. He will go, it will swap to the inside at McLean's, but just jumps back behind Colin Dunn. So nose to tail, 3 minutes of the race remaining, so probably only 2 more laps, maybe 3 depending on whereabouts Gary Preble is in relation to the start finish line. But Colin Dunn, he's got a busy 3 laps ahead, or 2 or 3 laps ahead. It will be the longest 2 or 3 laps of his life, but at the moment Jack Mace is trying to make it as quick as possible, working his way up the inside down the exhibition straight. He will go, he's disappeared, so we know they're side by side, but for how much longer? There is the tail end of Jack Mace in towards the Robert chicane. We will go side by side on the brakes, and Jack Mace does manage to work his way up the inside. Colin Dunn, does he get the better run on the exit, as he hasn't had to compromise too much of his racing speed, but down the start finish straight there's nothing to pick between the pair of them, and we've still got 2 minutes of the race to go, so he could flip completely the other way.
And also, yeah, I don't think it's quite done and dusted as yet for Colin, is it? So Jack Mace will try and see if he can pull away, but Colin Dunn is desperately going to want to try and haul himself back inside the top six if he can once more. Nick Creed has now decided, yeah, he still wants to have that little bit of fun with Jamie Peters-Ennis, so he's not quite as close as Scott Ford was for lap after lap after lap, but he's not that far away. So on the left of your screens is the fight for 6th and 7th. On the right of your screens is going to be the fight for 11th and 12th at the moment, and we are almost down to the last few moments of this race now as well, with Gary Preble leading by what is a reasonably comfortable 4.5 seconds now from Bobby Simmons in second place, and James Black, who lost all of the time with the pit stop there, in third place. But still some good fights out on circuit, still to be resolved at the moment since taking up 6th place. So it does look as though Jack Mace has just pulled away on the left of your screens from Colin Dunn. Not by much, but I'd say by an extra KA's length.
Yeah, exactly what he needs to do at this late stage of the race. Gary Preble just crossing the line now, so he logically would be going on to the final lap of the race, depending on how Assetto Corsa will work it. I think we've had a change for second place. Yes, we have. That's James Black now up into second place. Bobby Simmons has has managed to lose that position down into third place. Nick Creed, having thrown everything at Jamie Peters-Ennis, has managed to lose all the time he's gained with only 45 seconds of the race remaining. So he's got to do all that hard work again, and maybe some slightly committed moves will have to be made. This is the battle for the final 2 steps on the podium. James Black on the right hand side of your screen, Bobby Simmons on the inside, very sideways into the old hairpin. There's door-to-door contact between the pair of them. You can see both of them scrambling for grip, but then Tom O'Farrell is now working his way into this. So this is 4 cars all fighting over 2nd, 3rd and 4th, or 3 cars fighting over 2nd, 3rd and 4th place. And at the moment, I wouldn't even want to call it, because Bobby Simmons is desperately trying to get 2nd place. Once again, door-to-door contact between the pair of them. James Black in 3rd. Tom O'Farrell could come away with 2nd place here, and I think he just might.
He's going to pick their pocket, surely, isn't he? He's picked the pocket for sure of James Black, but couldn't quite muster enough momentum to squeeze his way through and past Bobby Simmons. So it's all going to come down to the run in towards the Robert Chicane as to who's going to finish 2nd, 3rd or 4th in this one. Bobby Simmons gets a tag from Tom O'Farrell and gathers up the moment. Tom O'Farrell then goes defensive to prevent James Black from squeezing his way through. All of this won't worry Gary Preble, because he's on his way towards a victory in round 1 of the 2023 EnduroKA Winter Sim Sports Series. Bouncing over the curbs goes Tom O'Farrell through the final corner. It's going to be Bobby Simmons who finishes 2nd on the road. Who's going to finish 3rd on the road? They are door handle to door handle coming up towards the finish line, and it is, I think, just going to be James Black from Tom O'Farrell that finishes 3rd and 4th respectively on the road. Joe Kingston Lee will finish in 5th place, and then we'll wait the arrival of Colin Dunn, who should be there. Yeah, so here comes Joe Kingston Lee to finish in 5th place. Colin Dunn will finish in 6th position on the road, and then it should be Jack Mace ahead of then Ollie Ricks, who had that late pit stop. Jack Mace, I think, struggling coming over the start finish line. He might, Jack, have run out of fuel potentially on the very last lap, very last corner.
Yeah, he's just going to creep his way over the line. So Jack Mace finishes provisionally in 7th place. Then it's Ollie Ricks will be the next driver to take the checkered flag, followed by Rhys Atkin, and probably well deserved, Scott Thorne will just about finish in the top 10. The battle for 11th and 12th is not over as of yet, side by side towards the line. I think it's Jamie Peters-Ennis that will just manage to secure 11th place. Nick Creed will finish in 12th. The next driver to cross the line will be Greg Giles, followed by Alex Saville and Eric Bolter. Then a train of cars behind, and of course we've had a couple of cars a lap down that have already taken the checkered flag, but you can see just how close these finishing drivers are. Here's Frank Frostick doing everything he can to try and work his way past Tom Bunton. Towards the line they will go. I've got to say, I would say over half the grid probably finished side by side at that point.
It was an absolutely brilliant way to introduce the EnduroKA Winter Sim Sports Series to everybody. I mean, that, I don't know for you, Jack, but that 60 minutes seemed to flash by. Absolutely. Yeah. And that goes to show it was a good race.
Yeah, can we do it again, please? That was really, really good. And I'm looking forward, I think, mainly to Brands Hatch, purely because we don't have just 60 minutes of that. We've got 90 minutes of KA racing. It's going to be brilliant.
Yeah, I mean the usual EnduroKA races again. If you're not familiar with it, 3, 4, 5, 8 hours, 12 hours. We've had a 24 in the past, so they do vary in length, but they're all longer distance races, which allow you to accommodate in real life, the real series. 2, 3, 4, 5 drivers in the case of some of the races for this winter sim series, and it's just single drivers and 60-minute races. Apart from, as Jack suggested, Brands Hatch, which is going to be a 90-minute race. Driver of the race, Jack, your thoughts on maybe one before we pick up on a few interviews very shortly with some of those that have finished at the sharp end?
Oh God, I don't really know who to pick. I think purely on merit of pitting early, going against strategy that you'd expect, fighting their way back through the order, and then continuing to work their way back in towards the top three, and nearly by probably about a transponder's length, finishing in third place. Tom O'Farrell for me. That was a great race. A great race and a brilliant job, and just about 53.
Okay.
It's got the wrong comms sorted there.
So I have to say, yeah, that would I would after what was an amazing race, it's got to be. Who did I mention? It would be, yeah, Tom O'Farrell. Great race. Pitted nice and early. Didn't quite go against the strategy that we're expecting. Lost 8.5 seconds to Bobby, and then worked his way back through the order, through the lap traffic, and literally by a bumper's length finished in third place. So for me, Tom O'Farrell has got that.
I don't know who to pick in reality. It was there was some brilliant racing in there. But let's chat to the first of our drivers. Let's chat to the driver that finished in third position, James Black. James, that looked rather busy out there, but good fun. Are you there, James?
And it may be an issue we don't have in real life.
We can hear you now, James.
Okay, sorry
yes,
about that.
we can, yeah. Third place, as I say, it looked a pretty busy one, to say the least.
Yeah, no, it's a great battle with Gary to begin with at the start of the race, and then I think we were literally trading temps for second until I think Gary made the gamble to go to the pits. I then carried on a little bit, but was unaware where my pit box was, so had a slight overshoot, which cost me the time in the pit stop. But battle my way back through, and a good battle with Tom and Bobby on the last lap to finish a P3 on the first race.
I mean, you've driven and raced reasonably successfully in low-powered front-wheel drive cars in the past in your junior saloon car days. How do these EnduroKAs compare in the SimSport series?
Yeah, so I think they're pretty similar. I think the KAs do turn a little bit better because the Saxo's got a very bizarre steering rack in it. But using that experience, along with a lot of quite a few laps in testing on the KA, I think is proven to hopefully pay off. And I can't wait for round number 2 at Silverstone.
Final question from me before no doubt Jack will ask you a couple of questions. You were talking about a bit of testing and turning a few laps in these cars. I've been looking at some of the practice servers and the number of laps that some drivers have turned. Gary Preble being one, who's been clearly not done a great deal of other work over the course of the last few days. How many laps did you turn in the practice sessions?
I'm not 100% sure. So I know a big group of us. So me and Gary have been testing together along with a few of the others.
In the Frank Frostick channel.
Yeah, in the Mark II Madman server, that's the one. And I'm not sure how many laps I'd done, but I know, especially for the test race we done on Wednesday, it was quite a few laps put in. So yeah, it's paid off, but Gary always seems to have a 10.42 in hand, so there's still a bit to learn, I think.
Jack?
Yeah, only got really one question for you, James. We saw a couple of drivers getting caught out around about the mid-race point, mainly with oversteer at the exit of Coppice or the old hairpin, potentially when the tyres were at that point where they were just in between new and sort of used, but then also the fuel will have dropped out with varying strategies. How did you work all of that? Because obviously you're the only person that can do that. You're the only one that can feel how the car feels, how the track evolution has changed the handling, how the fuel has dropped out, and how the tyres are feeling. Was it a busy job, both battling, working through lap traffic, keeping your eyes up the road, but then also managing strategy? It must have been a busy job.
Yeah, I think I managed the strategy pretty well until until my crew chief came over the radio saying I've got 25 minutes of fuel left and I had 29 minutes left for the race. So there was a bit of adjusting to the pit strategy halfway through the race, and as you say, I think people sliding in a little bit may have done a lot of low fuel runs. I made sure before the race I'd done a high fuel run, so I knew at the start of the race, which I believe I was the strongest at the start of the race, I knew what the car was going to do because a lot more weight over the rear end. So maybe a few more practicing for a few of the others with a high fuel and a low fuel run. But yeah, say managing it, and say my experience in Brit car has taught me to manage a lot of traffic and a lot of varying situations. So again, putting the real world practice to use in the sim world today.
Well, I've got to say it was great to see a very busy race all round, and once again, congratulations on finishing, albeit the last step of the podium, but it was no mean feat for sure, finishing P3. So before we let you go, anybody you'd like to thank or shout out?
Say big shout out to my sponsors, Clive Empson Auctioneers, Unique Finishing Solutions, Ancaster Group, and Vinyl Cutting Solutions. They will support me in the real world, as I hopefully they'll be back for this year. To support me in whatever I'm racing in 2023.
Great stuff, James. Thank you for joining us in the commentary box, and we'll see you in 2 weeks' time at Silverstone.
Yes, can't wait. Thank you.
Cheers, James. So that was James Black. We do have a couple more drivers that, of course, we would like to bring in, and definitely one that we do need to have a chat to is Bobby Simmons. Busy race, eh? It seemed like you had a battle with pretty much everyone. Strategy played a part. There was a lot of side-to-side action, maybe a bit of trading paint. But how was that from your perspective? And it must have been a bit of a close finish as well.
Yeah, an extremely close finish. I mean, for my first ever league race, it was unbelievable. The standard of driving is really good. I have to apologise to James a little bit at the end. I made a mistake, got on the grass, half spun it, and then just caught a lapped car right at the wrong period, and we almost had it coming together, and then it was the last lap battle, and I just had to try and keep ahead. I just tried to keep it clean, but just unfortunately, just a little touches there, here and there.
Yeah, it seemed like from at least our perspective, I'm not 100% sure how busy it was trying to collect those moments up, but the cars could take a little bit of contact. There was a bit of bump drafting. We saw some door-to-door contact, but it never seemed to affect one car more than the other. It was very even, and some of the battling, it's great to see because the cars can take that bit of brute force. And would you say that was something that was used in adequate measures? Let's go with there was a bit of bump drafting and maybe a couple of bump and runs. Would you say that only adds to the I guess the realism of the series?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the contact was, side by side with Gary. I think it was just before the first stops. We were banging doors. We were just talking about it. And we're just talking about how you can take that hit and carry on and only be a second behind or half a second behind, catch up and do it again. And it's a real physical sport. Although it's not supposed to be, it does really add to the racing at the end of it, especially this series. It's really good.
Yeah, well, it was brilliant to watch. One final question from myself, at least. We've opened the series here at Donington Park, a great circuit, probably arguably one of the best places to open the series. We go to both Silverstone, Snetterton, Alton Park, Brands Hatch, and then a mystery circuit yet to be voted on. Any circuit you're specifically looking forward to? One that maybe you are slightly faster at?
I've done a lot of racing around Brands Hatch, not in real life, in sim. And it's my local track, so it's my favourite track. But I'm really interested to see what we get for the mystery track. I'm hoping it's somewhere like Croft or somewhere random like the Nürburgring. That'd be awesome.
Well, we've got all that to look forward to. Mark, any questions from yourself?
It's really just one, Bobby. That's all. Obviously, you've got a lot of sim racing experience, but you're as yet to dip your toe in the water in real life. I know you're mega busy with your mechanicking duties, and you've got the university team in I'm not going to mention the championship, another championship that exists in the UK. Has sim racing whet your appetite enough to want to? If you were the winner, pick up your odds prize and go and do it for real?
Absolutely. I mean, luckily my dad owns the Purple Sector racing car, so maybe that would be a way in. But if I had my ARDS license and then I were to go into racing, yeah, I'd try and give it my hardest shot.
Well, you certainly proved that you're quick. So well done on this evening. Congratulations on second place in the Purple Sector racing car, and looking forward to seeing you at Silverstone in a couple of weeks' time. Well done.
Thank you very much. Looking forward to seeing you guys too.
So that was Bobby Simmons, who finished in second position. And then we've got one final driver to bring into the commentary box. And that, of course, is our winner of the first ever round of the EnduroKA Winter Sim Sports Series. Gary Preble joins us in the commentary box. Gary, I know you've put a shift in over the course of this last week or so, getting to understand these cars. You've turned plenty of laps in testing, and it's paid off. Not an easy win. You finally got a gap, but it took a long time to have nobody in your mirrors.
It did, yeah. It was a fantastic race. I mean, I'm used to racing C1s and stuff, so the KAs is a completely different outfit. And Frank Foskett told me to jump on in and join these guys, and it's been incredible. But yes, it's taken me a while to get head around it, and like you say, I've certainly been putting in the hours during last week and doing lots of testing, lots of different fuel strategies, pit strategies. And yeah, what a fantastic race. I mean, got a good start, and James got by me, and it was, and I could see Bobby coming in the mirrors. I'm thinking, oh no, I thought the two of us were going to work together and drag each other along, but in the end, James was holding me up a little bit. I was the faster in a lot of areas, and I thought at one point, is he backing me into Bobby? Which was shaping up to be a fantastic race. But I don't know what happened in the pit stops, but I came out and I couldn't see him, and I thought, oh, here we go.
Well, we can fill you in on that. James Black missed his pit stop board, so he didn't know which pit garage he was in, so he had to back it up in the pit lane, and that was just enough, wasn't it, to seal it for you?
That explains it. Yeah, I mean, I could see Bobby come in the latter part of the race, and I think I was gapping him at about 2-3 seconds. And at one point, he was sort of closing in on me a little bit, and I was just sort of kept my head down, kept my concentration going, didn't want to overstep the mark too much. So, of course, you're trying to drive well within yourself, not to make any silly mistakes and throw it away. So there was no mega fast lap times, I don't believe, but the consistency certainly paid off.
Final question from me before no doubt Jack will have one for you, and then we'll let you go. Of course, we go to Silverstone next, the circuit that you know. The final circuit of the year, though, is the one that drivers are going to vote for. As somebody that knows Castle Combe like the back of their hands, is that going to be high up on your list of those you're going to vote for?
Oh, sure. That's got to be right up there, isn't it? I mean, unfortunately, I can't make the next round at Silverstone. We've got our awards evening with the...
your Classic Touring Car Awards, yeah.
Which is on the 21st. So unless I can take my whole rig up into the hotel room or something, which I don't think is really going to happen sensibly.
With your commitment this week, Gary, I wouldn't put it past you.
Be doing it on some sort of laptop somewhere. No, it's a great shame I'm missing around. Certainly looking forward to the rest of the season.
Jack?
Well, just one final one for myself. I'm glad you mentioned commitment because, of course, having kept an eye on all of the practice sessions that have been hosted, and of course the practice race as well, you were putting in a good amount of laps, Gary. It's great to see the commitment of not only yourself but a lot of the other members on the grid. Would you say that spending seat time in this car is quite important, because we've alluded to it throughout the entire night? It's got a unique driving style, but there are multiple ways you can do it. You can use the brakes and carry the momentum through the corner, or use a little less brake and scrub the speed mid-corner. Would you say that is something that you only find out in seat time? And more importantly, would you say you've learned maybe even more with just the lapping you've turned tonight?
Oh, exactly that. Myself and Jack, we spent a lot of time, on the server. Myself and Frank, there's normally sort of three of us being most evenings trying different strategies, different fuels, different tyre pressures. We've literally been through everything, what works, doesn't work. And like you said, spent hours and hours trying to draft each other. And do you know what? It doesn't really make a huge amount of difference. Just the biggest thing is just learning to drive these things as smooth as you possibly can. And obviously maintaining the momentum's the absolute key on these without.
Well, I've got to say it was great to watch throughout the entire evening. So once again, congratulations on winning the opening round of the EnduroKA Winter Sim Series. Before we let you go, anybody you'd like to thank or shout out?
Probably my other half, Jodie. Actually, she's all the nights and that I've been on here. She's she's in there in the other room, a bit lonesome. So no, big thank you, sir, for giving me the time to sit on here.
Great stuff. Congratulations, Gary, once again, and we'll see you in about a month's time at Snetterton.
Thanks, mate. Take care.
Good
Cheers,
to chat,
bye-bye.
Gary. There we go. Congratulations to Gary Preble. And that's the last of the drivers we'll be chatting to this evening. What has been a fantastic evening. Of course, that is only the first of several rounds of the EnduroKA. As we've been chatting to the drivers, we've mentioned that in 2 weekends' time, we will head to Snetterton, to Silverstone, I should say, rather, for a 60-minute race there on the 21st of January. Then we'll be on to Snetterton on the slightly longer 300 configuration before it's up to Cheshire and Alton Park in February. And the main season that we know about for sure that's happening at the moment is a 90-minute race at Brands Hatch. Extra strategy maybe for that penultimate race. Final race of the season, though, as yet to be voted on as to where we will go. We really don't know. We had a bit of a conversation, Jack and I, off stream, and came up with a couple of really silly suggestions that could be an absolute hoot, but we simply don't know. And all of them, Jack, are fighting for this fantastic prize. 3 ARDS tests are being offered by Motorsport Vision Track Days, MSVT Racing, fully paid ARDS tests. So that is the prizes for the drivers at the sharp end of this series, and that is to encourage more sim racers to try out racing in the real world. And we couldn't do it without the likes of MSVT and, of course, Positive Perception, who have created all of the fantastic liveries on these cars as well. But let's also remember that the Grid Finder, Burton Power, and EnduroKA themselves have all come together to create what I would say, Jack, is a cracking little esports series.
Yeah, absolutely. If we could do this again tomorrow, 100% I would. It was an amazing night, and you've got to think this is just the tip of the iceberg, because this is the first time for a lot of drivers that they may have raced in such mass numbers on the simulator, with everybody in very similar machinery, or everybody's dealing with the same conditions. So this could be where we slowly start to pick out the drivers that we may see door to door all season long, and it's only going to get better as the drivers build confidence, build speed, build new information that they can apply not only to the strategy but also how they can race against the other cars, potentially even closer, although I'm not sure how that's possible for some drivers this evening. But the opening round of this series, it couldn't have been any better.
It's been an absolute hoot. I hope you've enjoyed watching it as well. So from Jack, myself, Mark Werrell, and everybody that's involved in the EnduroKA Winter Sim Sports Series, thanks for joining us at Donington Park. But make sure you're back with us in 2 weeks' time when we go to Silverstone on the national circuit. Goodbye.